Good morning, everyone. It's 11 o'clock. And we have a quorum, it looks like, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. And let's go around the room and just do quick intros. If we could start with you, Joe, please.
Joe DiMena, registered qualifying patient.
Matt Lascala, dispensary agent.
Stephanie Elzinga, Department of Health Services.
I don't think that mic's on.
Oh, Jessica Rigler, Department of Health.
Chris Finnick, Department of Health Services.
Murray Stein, dispensary agent. Ryan Hurley, Arizona Dispensaries Association.
George Griffith, Analytical Cannabis Lab Association.
R.D. Hendrickson, dispensary agent.
Vince Figuarelli, Arizona Department of Public Safety Crime Laboratory.
Tom Salo, Department.
Megan Whitby, Department of Health.
I don't know if the mics. Oh, that's definitely working now. Okay. I was going to say I don't know if the mics are working, but they are now. So just as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded, and we'll post the meeting recording online following the meeting. Seeing that we have quorum, thank you all for showing up the week of Christmas. We do very much appreciate you coming back so we can work on finalizing this report. So that's what we will be doing today, is reviewing and finalizing the report. We're not looking for new introductions, but as you've reviewed this report, if you have identified things that we got wrong, misinterpreted through the motions, all of that, I will open the floor up for discussion.
First of all, thank you for doing this and putting this all together. Overall, I think it looks great. I had one clarification under the sampling procedures. I had thought, and this may or may not be required at this point, but I had thought we wanted to start at the level 2, and allow the department the discretion to move somebody to a 1 or a 3, depending on their compliance history. But considering we're meeting again in 6 months, we could always update it then. But I thought the intention was to allow the department in the future discretion to go one way or the other.
Any other comments on that? What I recorded here was the motion that was passed, but that was a discussion we had. I can capture it in the narrative above if you'd like.
That'd be fine.
Here. Let's see. Trying to think of the best way. See, I can't write on the spot. That's the problem.
Yeah,
What's the best way to phrase that?
The ability to have autonomy in the testing process or qualify
I would just say
or punish, but
the council also discussed grant
a good standing or bad standing.
allowing DHS to have the discretion to move
That's right.
a licensee from level 2 to level 1 or level 3, depending on their compliance history. Something like that, plus or minus. Okay,
Does that get the
Yep.
sentiment?
I think so.
Okay, this is Murray Stein, dispensary agent. Jessica, did you or any of your peers receive the email I sent last night?
I did.
Good. So for the purposes of this meeting, I'd like to just quickly read this. After reviewing the Medical Marijuana Testing Advisory Council findings and recommendations draft report, we have the following requested changes. The Medical Marijuana Testing Advisory Council motioned and approved that any edible or infused product made from concentrate that has previously passed safety testing is exempt from final testing for residual solvents, heavy metals, residual pesticides, fungicides, and growth regulator testing. The motion approved was not contingent on potential statutory changes. The suggested change is to remove this statement from Section 8. For clarity, we suggest that the edible testing exemption be added to each of the applicable sections. including Section 3.3 for pesticides, fungicides, growth regulators, Section 3.4 on residual solvents, and Section 3.2 on heavy metals. The Advisory Council agreed to remove the herbicides from the testing criteria. However, herbicides are inconsistently included in the final recommendations, and we go into specifics of where that is. The Advisory Council agreed to sample in accordance with ANSI AQL General Level 2. It is important to reference Z1.4 to be clear about the ANSI standard to be used. And then lastly, other clarifications that may be considered include the clarification that residual solvent testing is not required for marijuana flower. And then I sent you the PDF of some minor comments in there that caught one or two spelling errors and punctuation, because I'm like that.
Me too, I appreciate it.
You're welcome. I spent 20 years running a technical services firm that was all about tech rewriting, so I'm a little full of that. And other things, if you hear my wife talk. So you can strike that from the record. I need to make this point, and I need to make it really strongly. And I thought I did last week, but it's not acceptable for us to stick that in Section 8 where it'll get lost. We really need to qualify, and I understand the state's reticence with this, that there are exemptions, that there are recommended exemptions for infused and edible products at the solvent, pesticides, and heavy metal stages if tested previously, and again provided a certificate analysis or technical report, which should be characterized as the either or, and the chain of custody is provided. If we don't make sure this happens, our industry will be seriously hurt. And I'm going to pass the torch to Ricky and let you respond, because in the edibles game, you are also especially sensitive to the issues here.
Yes, hello, R.D. Hendrickson here, dispensary agent. I apologize for not being here last week. With my travel schedule, it's just impossibility for me to make it here. I did go through the minutes of the meeting, though, and so a couple of the things that I wasn't able to be here to comment on, I'm going to just allow those to be couched until the 6 months. But we are a boutique manufacturer also. We make custom order, very small batch products to a number of dispensaries that if we'd have to test every one of those batches, that would be the end of that part of our model as manufacturers. And the fact that we're a grower, we test it, we have a lab, we do all of our extractions, we test it again, and then now the state's position was that we're final product on the very same, so we got to test our product 3 times if we are not allowed to adopt this prior testing part of this thing. So that would, again, as a small operator, that model that just destroys us. And then on top of that, I have there's other business models in this state that makes food ready to sale at their dispensaries, and having this final testing, I think I don't see how they survive the protocol, even with the contaminants, if they got to microbials, if they have to test a final product and they couldn't make a ready to sell product that day.
You're describing Mint, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
Mint has a hot kitchen, and the products they produce, they immediately serve. And that's a real challenge, and you can imagine if they have to test for something that has any significant latency, that's going to entirely destroy that model.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know Mint's business, but my understanding is that kitchen is outside of their licensed premises and is actually regulated by a different section of the department. And so, I'm not sure how they add it in, but presumably the final product you buy from the dispensary would be distillate, right? Or in a butter or something like that, and that's what would have to be tested to go into their kitchen. I'm not sure I follow, or that that everything you're going to test, you have to test 3 times. I'm not sure where.
Well, I'm just, without having full clarification of what these recommendations or these mandatory testing protocols are going to be, we would potentially be subject to all 3 of those parts of the manufacturing process.
So, meaning you grow and extract your own, right? So, if you are just providing it into your own products, though, and you know that there are no residual solvents in it, or are reasonably confident, you wouldn't have to test that material before you put it in your own.
So we'd have to
product.
test our distillate. We could get by without testing the flour portion of that.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's unless you're selling the flour to somebody else, right?
We do that also, but that's why we test all of our flour anyway, just because we do final test on all of that. So, again, the testing thing for the small batch kitchens like ourselves will be, it'll be a hard thing for us to overcome and still maintain our existing business model.
I think it does make sense to put that recommendation, though, in the applicable testing sections of the report.
So moving this particular recommendation from 8 and then putting it in, what did you say?
In each of those three sections, 3.2, 3.3, and 3.4.
And I do note it is already in the executive summary as well. Yeah.
Let's do that.
Thank you, Jessica. While you're doing that, I might just comment. I ran across an article today, and we're all worried about regulation and what's going to come down, not just with 1494, but the feds and the increasing interest the FDA and DEA and other parties take in what we're doing. And with more regulation comes more challenges. And just reading an article today, and I thought this had largely been cleared out, but they're still finding that as much as 70% of the CBD products on the open market are mislabeled, or they just don't have the amount of CBD they claim to. They're finding plasticized materials in some of these products and all kinds of other issues. So when it's a Wild West, you're going to have some people out there just shooting things up. We don't want to be the guys caught in the crossfire.
So I've moved that bullet into the heavy metals, pesticides et al., and solvents sections at this time. I left it in 8. Do you want me to strike it from section 8? Leave it there as well.
I think you can remove it. There was one other comment that I made, Jessica, and it was related to, and I'm kind of in two places with this. You make reference to final product several times in the document. There's no actual reference to final or finished product in the statute or in any of the documents that the statute refers to. Are we making a mistake, or, is this an error to define that term or use that phraseology at this stage? Are we somehow going to limit ourselves? We all know what the intent is, which is to ensure that the consumer receive a product that they can trust has been tested and that the details that are labeled on that product are accurate. So if you're able to achieve that, is it a mistake in your recommendation to use the phrase final? Part of me wants to say yes, because I know what the intent is, but part of me worries about how it will be construed. I'm sorry Steve isn't here to respond to that one.
We can call him if you want. Yeah, and I think we had some of this discussion at the last meeting too. If you take out the word final and it says all product, then that might be even more restrictive. Yeah. So it's that balance of, what, I think the department understands the council's intent, which is that the testing occurs at places that it makes sense, basically. We still are grappling with that legal interpretation of what the statute requires, so that's one of the harder parts. But, for example, testing a flour for solvents maybe doesn't make a lot of sense because it hasn't been concentrated yet, as an example. But yeah, the language piece of final product versus product, I don't really know what to say.
I guess the only point I'll make then is you may want to go through the document and sanitize it to make sure you're consistent in its usage. There's one or two places where you don't use final. Maybe it's intended.
It was based on the motion passed by the council. Yeah.
I don't think anybody thought, I certainly didn't, that we would have to test flour for solvents because we don't use solvent, right? You don't need it unless you're creating a concentrate. So are we able to put that all concentrate products or all? It doesn't make sense for us to test flour for something we don't use it on. All extracted products.
So because this was a prior motion, we would need a motion of the council to change this to all extracted products, if that's what the council so.
I'd like to make a motion to add the word extracted.
Seconded.
And can I just clarify, do you want final to be replaced with extracted or all final extracted product?
Where are we at here? So I was also looking in the executive summary, but.
Yeah, another good place to make the change.
Sorry, my eyesight's not so great these days. I know, right? I can't see how loud my shirts are either. I dressed it down for you today, Murray. Let's see. So no, I think all final extracted products is fine.
So the motion is to rephrase the statement, which would be updated in the executive summary as well, to say all final extracted products must be tested for residual solvents. And the second still stands on the motion?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion passes, thank you.
I think that's what I just did, just extracted products.
Okay, all right.
Did you get everything on your list there?
So Murray, you had made a comment about,
3.2, 3.3, and 3.4.
those are all in there, yep, that's been updated. You had made a comment about the sampling and updating the ANSI sampling to include the Z1.4.
Correct. And I was hoping.
Is that the table reference?
I think it is, or it's the. That she's referring to. I was hoping Hope could report, but this individual is an expert.
So the information that Tiffany presented at our last council meeting, in her slides, in those ANSI AQL tables that she presented, the footer on the table does reference, I can't see very well either, ANSI ASQ standard Z1.4.
Good.
Again, it's a change of motion, so if folks would want, I'll put it here so you can see.
Isn't it just a clarification? I mean, well, I'll move to clarify that we include the appropriate reference as read in the record.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion passes. Again, I will take these and update them back in the executive summary as well.
So just to be clear, Jessica, you did add that caveat regarding edibles and infused products not requiring testing to each of the three key sections of 3.2, 3.3, and 4?
Yes, they are, here's, I'm going backwards, but here's 3.4.
Okay.
First bullet on 3.4. First
Okay.
bullet of 3.3. And first bullet of 3.2.
Thank you. There was a comment about herbicides.
Yes. So related to the herbicides, the Oregon table does not list any herbicides. Statute requires testing for herbicides. So that's where the discrepancy falls between where it says herbicides and not. So this motion to test all products for pesticides, fungicides, and growth regulators listed in this table eliminated herbicides because there are no herbicides in the table. But the motion for testing for herbicides when the department selects an herbicide, it was included in the test methodology for testing to follow in-house or other validated protocols. That makes sense. Other comments on the report?
Under potency, I had a comment where you mentioned potency. This is second to the last bullet under 3.5. Potency reporting should note the results of low-level quantitation. Just so we don't find ourselves having to put that on our label, can we please use a reference less than LOQ in parentheses here?
So behind level of quantitation, put.
Yeah, just parenthetical. I actually use the less than sign.
Okay. Well, now you're gonna have to make me go and, oh no, it's not less than or equal, it's just less than.
Yeah.
That label is valuable real estate.
Again, this is a change to a former motion, so if you'd like to make a motion to amend this bullet in this manner.
I make a motion to amend the bullet that includes the reference parentheses less than LOQ in potency reporting shall note the results are below level of quantitation.
motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion passes. And again, I will make this update in the executive summary.
My next question, Jessica, referred to, which is the paragraph just above 6.0 remediation testing. We refer to this technical report multiple times. The state's requested that, or will ask of that from the testing vendors. What does that report look like? I'm still a little concerned that we're going to end up having to show something to our patients or provide something to our patients that's challenging for them to interpret. I can tell you that, we will go to our testing lab partners and insist that they provide a single-page confident cannabis style document. But I understand the state may not feel like they're in a position to demand that or require it. But I still don't understand what this 6 or 7 page technical report looks like. Can you help explain that? Do you guys know?
Does anyone in here have an example from test reports that they're getting from their laboratories? Okay. Or to describe, it's essentially a list of every single parameter that particular product has been tested for with the values.
And the state wants that for their own purposes, correct?
No, this is not to report back to the state, but that the laboratory reports to the dispensary who they've completed their testing for.
Does this worry anybody?
Yeah.
So I'm going to make a motion that, I don't know what the right motion is, but we need to whatever the state wants is fine, but what we want is going to be a single page.
I think, and when one of the issues we were running into, Murray, I think Tabitha said, is that the single page wasn't compliant with ISO.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to have to require something, it was the thing that they were going to have to do anyway to be ISO certified.
It was the path of least resistance.
Yeah, and so the thought was if the patient requests the test results, then you have to at least give them that. But I agree. I think that we'll all want to try to provide something more digestible. But
Yeah, this is Vince Figarelli from the DPS Crime Lab. So there are ways around that. We strive for a single-page report for all of our reports, but you have to put somewhere, like on a web page or in another place, your testing criteria. So there are ways to do a condensed report, but yes, accreditation does require, hey, we did this test, this is how we did it, this is what we found for everything that you're testing for. So there are ways to consolidate it. Happy to tell you how we do that, but that is possible.
Will there be an opportunity for the testing advisory committee to provide suggestions to the testing labs about what dispensaries will be wanting? How do we communicate that separate from the free market?
It's not, the free market is the best. The council's job is to make recommendations to the department, the legislature, and the governor in what kind of regulations guide the program.
George Griffith, I believe Tabitha's point was, as they stand today, the typical confident cannabis result that you get via email from your testing lab is not ISO compliant. That does not mean that it cannot be ISO compliant and should be able to be produced as it is being today as acceptable results from any testing. I think, again, Tabitha's point was she has one that is ISO compliant, the rest of us don't, and that may be valid today, but it doesn't mean it will be next November.
Is there a specific statutory requirement that the testing results be ISO compliant, or that the labs be ISO compliant?
The requirement is that the labs be ISO requirement. Approved, ISO approved, rather.
Yeah, but a component of getting your ISO accreditation does have to do with your report. There's multiple pieces to that, including the methods of testing, but also your report.
Of course, and ISO is a process, right? They're not telling us how or what to test. It's just making sure we do the same process every time, and it's repeatable.
So what's the path here? Is it we revisit this in 6 months to discuss where confident cannabis and other sites are, to see what the labs, what their pain points are? Do we work this through the dispensary associations?
George,
To raise the issue? George, what's your specific concern from a lab perspective?
My concern is that the technical report can be, reams of paper.
Right. Well,
And DHS simply, as I understand the statute, needs to be, reproducible. We can store it electronically. I would have to triple my lab space to store the paper if I had
Well, I
to
don't think
print all
anybody
these,
was
yeah.
requiring you to store it as paper, are we?
I know, but it's also onerous to produce it. When we're already producing a confident cannabis lab report, and it is our intent to make that ISO compliant as part of the process of being ISO certified for my lab.
Let me ask a question, RD Endocrine Dispensary Agent here, George. So you guys do all the ISO standards for testing, and you retain that data. That data is available, correct?
Yes.
So, I mean, if that data is available, at what point would somebody actually even need that data, one? And if they did need it, we could actually reproduce it for that need. What we need is a one-page standard test that we can provide to our patients. That's really what we need in a nutshell. If that information is available, why would we have to reproduce it when 99.9% of the population will never want that?
What if we put in a a modifier into the recommendation that allows for or other summary format that is consistent with ISO certification? So that way you have the option in the future if you're able to do something that is ISO compliant.
Well, it is allowed. I mean, you can do that. If you go to the DPS website and you go to the crime lab portion, you'll see what we do. We describe what tests we do for each section. We describe how we do it, the instrumentation that we use. Our report is usually 1 or 2 pages. At the bottom, it says, for additional information on testing, go to our website and go to our webpage. So it's there. It's possible. It's there. You can do it. I don't think we need to explicitly say that that's a possibility. Now it's upon the laboratory to figure out how to get there, and the accrediting body will come in and say, well, you're not specific enough here on your report. You need to point to this on your webpage. If you do it by webpage, you need to be more explicit on your webpage about what you're doing. And with regard to the documentation, we don't give, when we do discovery in court, we don't give all the 50 pages of data that we have generated. That stays at the laboratory. Now, they can ask for that, and we have it, and we give it to them. But you do have to have those records for accreditation purposes when they come and they do their inspection.
That makes sense. Still getting it down to that one page.
So Ryan, you want
Yeah, so I'll if everybody's comfortable with that, I'll make a motion to amend, I guess it's the recommendation in 5.0 in the conforming executive summary. Where either, we said, produce a technical report, comma, or other ISO compliant summary report, comma.
Sorry, I
that's
copied what
fine.
I had put from you before, but I can redo it.
Maybe I said it better earlier. That's fine. Yep.
What does it say? I can't see
Okay.
that far.
So
Sorry, here, let me see if I.
we're a little further back today.
It's not on purpose. Oh, is that?
Can you just read it out to us, Jessica?
Yeah, so now it states the final recommendation, or that laboratories should be required to, at a minimum, produce a technical report or other summary report that is consistent with ISO accreditation, detailing laboratory testing results.
So that's the motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. It will be reflected in the executive summary as well.
Thank you, Ryan.
Before we finalize this, maybe give everybody just one more second to think of anything else. I'd like to hear from the department what the process is going forward from here. Maybe just a summary of the public hearing process and where we're headed from here on out.
We will finalize this report, and it will be transmitted under cover of our director to the governor's office, as well as the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate by the end of the year. And then following that, we will be, actually, we're already working on draft rules based on the recommendations of the department. And Megan or Stephanie, I don't know if you guys want to talk about the rule process.
I don't know what there is to say. We're starting the process. It'll be similar to other rulemaking that the department has done. If you want specifics on that, I would direct you to our website. We have multiple resources that lay that out. But throughout that process, there's a lot of, we check in with all the stakeholders, which would include the folks in this room. So you will have an opportunity to comment on what we're working on.
And I guess what I was looking for is for the record and for the folks back here that there is another opportunity to comment on these things and to comment on how this gets interpreted into the final rules. So I just want to make sure everybody understands there's a whole other process here and to make sure you stay involved so that we can finalize the rules. So that'll be happening over what kind of time frame and how many meetings, public hearings?
I mean, I can't give you specifics until the kids, if I'm told. But like Jessica already mentioned, we're already working on that, and it is going to be our priority for rulemakers in the beginning of next year.
Okay, thank you.
We're hoping to get something out as soon as possible, hopefully early spring, so that there's good guidance, so there's not a delay or burden on the part of the dispensaries or for the patients. For those that are interested, though, in the final report, we do link to the Administrative Council and Rule website. This link goes actually to the active rulemakings for medical marijuana specifically, so you don't have to dig any farther. So you can keep checking back on that page. Any draft rules that we put up gets posted on that website.
Jessica, will the council get notice of the rulemaking process?
Megan, will the council get notice of the rulemaking process?
Please.
Okay, so my next steps for this report then, after someone makes a motion to approve it, and that is.
Need a recommendation for pay increase for all the I mean, they're pardoning, people in wherever, reading the news, so why not? Do we have any real power here?
Retention bonuses.
I would, what you don't see reflected here that will be reflected in the final form is all the updates we made today, so the motions will get translated into the executive summary. I will also do a final read-through for any spelling errors, punctuation errors, and we'll fix the spacing formatting since we added things so there aren't weird page breaks and stuff.
I will go ahead and make a motion to approve the report as amended today.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion passes unanimously. I know we're a couple minutes over. I just want to thank you all for your commitment to this process. It's been a lot in a really short time frame and a lot of really technical information. I've learned a lot through this process. I think many of us probably have, but thank you for being so committed to the patients of Arizona. I think this is going to be a really good health and safety measure for them.
Thank you to the department.
Yeah, thank
Guys,
you.
Yes. Thank you.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.